Hi Amal, thank you for this interview.
Thank you, Lilith.
First of all, what's your reaction to the European Court judgment?
Well, we were very happy with the judgment. It's a victory for Armenia. You'll remember, Lilith, Armenia was neither a plaintiff nor a defendant in this case. Armenia was a third party that intervened in the case, along with Turkey, and it did so for one reason, because the lower court's judgment had, in 3 paragraphs, cast doubt on the reality of the Armenian genocide. It cast doubt on whether or not the massacres of 1915 really constituted genocide, and it used language that was frankly insulting to the Armenian community. It said that those events were somehow not able to be objectively proved or did not lend themselves to definitive conclusions. So we were very concerned, obviously, about that language. We went to the court to argue that in looking at what should be done now, the Grand Chamber should make sure that they didn't repeat that, and so that wouldn't stand as the record of what the European Court of Human Rights has to say on the matter. So those were our arguments, and in the judgment, we won. The court said that those findings by the lower court were inappropriate. So 10 of the judges said that they should never have discussed the point at all. It was outside of its jurisdiction, which is a point we also made in our arguments. And another 7 judges said that, quote, the Armenian genocide is a clearly established historical fact. We're obviously very pleased that that's now happened, and that's why the judgment today is a victory for Armenians.
What exactly did the European Court decide?
The European Court decided that Perincek's speeches should not be criminalized because they didn't rise to the level of speech that is going to incite racial hatred or violence in the country in which they were made, which was Switzerland, which is actually an encouraging decision from the perspective of freedom of expression, because of course the court should be concerned with any country's laws that make speech a crime, and it's obviously understandable that the court wants to be very careful about ensuring that states only criminalize speech in the most extreme of circumstances. This finding is not something that Armenia needs to be concerned with. People who talk about the Armenian genocide are not being prosecuted in the courts of Yerevan. They are, however, being prosecuted in the courts in Turkey. And it's interesting that today, in the aftermath of the judgment, Turkey's former foreign minister spoke to Al Jazeera and said, oh, Turkey celebrates the judgment because it respects freedom of expression. The reality is that in all the cases that have come before the court up to 2014, there have been 591 findings of violations of freedom of expression by the court, and almost half of those are violations by Turkey. So it's over 200 violations by Turkey, and the next worst offender was Austria with 32, and lower down the list you have Russia with 26 violations. So the record before the court is clear, and really what we hope is that Turkey's paying close attention to the judgment today, and that Turkey will embrace this high standard for freedom of expression that has been set, so that journalists like Hrant Dink are no longer prosecuted before Turkey's courts for the offense of insulting Turkishness or insulting the Turkish state.
Thank you, Amal. And do you have any final words for the Armenian people?
Well, I would just say it was a true honor to be able to represent Armenia in this case. And looking back, I'm sure Armenians don't really care much for what Mr. Perincek has to say. I think if we look at the issue as a whole, we might say Armenians care what the Pope will think, and we know that the Pope has come out and said that this was a genocide. We know that President Obama, before he became president, said it was a genocide. So you may have Turkey continue to deny that reality, but they can no longer, after today's judgment, point to a decision of the European Court of Human Rights to support that view. I think Turkey's continued denials are regrettable, and they are going to impede or slow the ability for the communities to come together and reconcile their differences. But I'm pleased and I'm honored to have been able to play a part in correcting the record, at least from the perspective of the courts today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lily.